The decision was not delivered through a speech, a ceremony, or a carefully prepared palace announcement. It came through a sealed order placed before King Charles in a private room, beside a file of newly uncovered documents. He read the final page twice. Then, without calling for another opinion, the king lifted his pen and signed away every remaining royal privilege still connected to his younger son. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles kept one hand against the desk after the ink dried, for balance. The hidden file contained correspondence, access logs, financial approvals, and agreements linked to Harry's life after he stepped away from royal duty. A royal directive is a written command issued in the sovereign's name, and this one removed palace access, residence invitations, protected family briefings, ceremonial consideration, and informal representation through senior offices. It did not erase Harry from the line of succession. It cut him away from the working monarchy. The king understood why that difference mattered. A son could remain part of the bloodline while losing every privilege that made him part of the institution. Charles had protected the crown from uncertain access, but he had also signed a sentence reaching into his own family. He stared at the final clause, declaring that no household member could restore those rights without the sovereign's written approval, and the room tightened around him. Harry received the decision through a formal call. He said nothing at first. Then he asked, with painful control, whether his father had personally approved every line. The answer came without comfort. Yes. Meghan watched his face change as the words settled. She did not interrupt, because his silence carried anger, grief, and the shock of realizing this was not another warning. It was final. One page in the file made the decision darker. Harry's signature appeared beneath an agreement palace officials believed had never been activated. The document showed that an informal royal channel continued operating after the Sussex departure, allowing messages and private summaries to move outside normal review. Someone had kept that pathway alive, and Charles feared it had blurred the line between family contact and royal authority. Harry ended the call, placed his phone face down, and walked away from the table. Meghan followed him with her eyes as he stopped at the doorway, shoulders rigid. "He has closed every door," he said quietly. But before the king could live with what he had signed, the palace had to face the people whose private wounds had turned a family dispute into a constitutional severing. Behind the language of privilege, protocol, and royal authority stood three men, bound by blood and divided by memory. Charles saw a monarchy he had spent a lifetime preparing to protect. William saw a future crown surrounded by risks he could no longer ignore. Harry saw the final proof that the institution would always choose its survival over the son who had once walked behind his mother's coffin. Charles felt the weight before anyone entered his study. Protocol meant the formal rules governing royal conduct, but this decision had moved far beyond rules. The king feared that any hesitation would be read as weakness, because the crown depended on clear boundaries, and those boundaries had already been tested. Yet the father inside him understood that enforcement could protect the institution while breaking the family holding it together. William entered and stopped when he saw the signed order on the desk. He did not touch it. The prince asked whether Charles was certain, and the monarch looked at the page before answering, "Certainty is no longer the luxury available to us." That reply told William everything. His father had not acted from confidence. He had acted because delay now seemed more dangerous than pain. Harry heard the order differently. To him, it was not an administrative separation, but a personal rejection. Meghan tried to steady him, reminding him that titles and access did not define his worth. Yet he admitted he had expected limits, not the removal of every private courtesy that had survived their previous clashes. Blood remained, but belonging had been stripped away. Camilla learned through a documented household briefing that the directive had been signed without a wider family consultation. The Queen Consort recognized why Charles had moved alone. Another round of appeals might have weakened his resolve. Catherine later spoke privately with William and warned that the order could shield the monarchy while destroying the last path back between the brothers. She understood that institutional success could still become personal ruin. Charles walked toward the family room and stopped outside. Photographs of William and Harry as boys waited beyond the door, carrying memories untouched by rank or duty. The king could not enter. He turned away, knowing the signature had drawn one line through the monarchy's future and another through his own past. Yet palace officials were already tracing the breach to one exact moment, and that discovery would make the family's grief far more dangerous. And when the family looked back for the moment, everything became irreversible. They found it not in a television interview or public accusation, but inside one private ceremony that was never meant to leave palace walls. The rupture did not begin with the newly discovered file. It began months earlier, during a private remembrance ceremony at Windsor, where only close family members and a small group of trusted staff were present. No cameras had been permitted. No public statement had been prepared. Yet within 48 hours, exact details from the gathering appeared outside the palace, including words spoken by the king in confidence. Charles had entered that ceremony, hoping grief might quiet the family's divisions. A remembrance ceremony is a private gathering held to honor someone who has died, and this one was dedicated to Queen Elizabeth. The monarch spoke not as a ruler defending his position, but as a father admitting that separation had wounded everyone. Harry listened without interruption. William stood nearby, already aware that a private gesture could carry consequences far beyond the room. Tension had been building for months. Harry still moved between family contact and institutional access, two worlds the palace could no longer safely treat as the same. Charles had allowed a limited informal channel to remain because he feared total silence with his younger son. That channel mattered because it carried private messages outside normal royal offices, giving personal affection a route that official rules had tried to close. Charles finished his tribute by speaking about the pain of brothers divided and a family learning to live with absence. William placed one hand briefly on Harry's shoulder. The prince believed the gesture had been accepted as a quiet promise that some moments would remain protected. 2 days later, exact phrases from the tribute appeared in a media briefing linked to people beyond the household. The future king remembered that touch and felt it had been received under false circumstances. Harry denied releasing the words during a recorded call with palace officials. He insisted the information had passed through several hands before reaching anyone outside. His defense did not calm William. It deepened the anger, because no one could explain how the king's exact language had escaped. Security staff traced the leak to an informal communications route that should have closed when Harry left active royal duty. The new documents revealed something worse. An old approval code had kept it alive, allowing summaries to move without senior review. Charles felt exposed, not because a monarch's statement had leaked, but because a father's confession had become public leverage. The king stopped waiting. He demanded a private confrontation with Harry, without advisors, statements, or distance between them. The leaked tribute may have opened the investigation, but it was the meeting behind a locked door that turned suspicion into a decision neither father nor son could take back. There were no aides in the room, no private secretaries seated nearby, and no prepared statements waiting on the table. Charles had demanded that the conversation happen face to face. Harry arrived carrying years of anger. The king arrived carrying the documents. Between them lay a single folder, thick enough to hold the evidence and heavy enough to crush what remained of their trust. Charles opened the meeting without ceremony. He told Harry this was not about interviews, memoirs, or public attacks. It was about royal access continuing after formal duties had ended. Royal access meant the protected routes, information, and permissions connected to the working monarchy, and the king believed those boundaries had been crossed long after they should have closed. Harry refused to accept that family contact could be treated like state property. He argued that speaking to his father should never depend on courtiers, codes, or approval from people who did not share their blood. Charles answered that the problem was not love, it was uncertainty. The palace could no longer tell when a private son was speaking and when a public figure was gathering words that might later escape. The accusation landed hard. Harry told Charles that William and senior officials had been allowed to define him as a danger instead of a brother and son. The king did not raise his voice. He pushed the folder across the table and tapped the page carrying Harry's signature. The younger man read it, looked up slowly, and said he had signed because he believed the agreement protected private family contact. Charles removed his glasses and folded them carefully. He told Harry the agreement had been used to bypass restrictions after its terms changed. Harry shoved his chair back, but the monarch ordered him to remain seated. The command froze the room. For one moment, father and son stopped hiding behind anger and saw the damage clearly. Harry then revealed, through a recorded account given during the meeting, that he had not reactivated the channel himself. He believed a senior palace contact had preserved it with Charles's knowledge. The king refused to name the staff member under investigation, yet his expression betrayed something worse. The breach may have involved someone trusted by both sides. Harry left without accepting the explanation. Charles remained behind and summoned William with the senior legal team. The argument had moved beyond family pain. Now royal authority would decide how far the punishment reached before nightfall began. The confrontation shattered the illusion that this was merely a family misunderstanding, because the next decision would be made not by wounded relatives, but by the people who controlled the machinery of the crown. Royal power rarely announces itself with raised voices. It moves through signatures, sealed instructions, revoked permissions, and doors that no longer open. After Harry left the meeting, Charles was joined by William, the keeper of the privy purse, the king's senior legal advisor, and the private secretary responsible for household access. Together, they translated one father's heartbreak into an order the entire monarchy would be forced to obey. Charles listened as the legal team explained that Harry's remaining privileges did not rest inside one single document. They survived through custom, personal permission, and informal courtesies that had continued because no one wanted to close the final family door. The keeper of the privy purse, the official who manages the sovereign's private finances, confirmed that ending those arrangements required a coordinated directive covering residences, transport, briefings, invitations, security support, and representation through palace offices. William supported complete institutional separation, but he resisted one final cut. The prince asked that Harry keep a direct private line to Charles, arguing that punishment should not erase the last possible conversation between father and son. The king hesitated. He feared that even private words could become entangled with public conflict again, yet denying all contact would turn protection into exile. The senior legal advisor placed 5 withdrawal notices beside the main directive. Charles signed each one slowly. He paused before the notice concerning Windsor access, knowing that this was not only a residence, but a place tied to childhood, mourning, and the memories both brothers still carried. Then the monarch signed. Catherine waited outside the meeting room. When William emerged, she saw the strain in his face before he spoke. She asked whether he had managed to protect anything. "Only the part that still belongs to a father," he answered. The future king knew he had helped secure the crown while risking the final thread connecting the family. The documents carried an even harsher clause. No invitation from another royal household could restore privileges removed by the sovereign. A confidential note also warned that the old communication route may have exposed protected schedules and family briefings beyond the Windsor ceremony, making the breach larger than anyone had admitted. Palace offices began enforcing the order before Harry understood its full reach. Ceremonial access vanished first. Then came the places he still associated with home. A residence request was returned without approval, a number stopped working, and a family visit was redirected through formal channels. Each notice carried the same message. The old exceptions were dead. The order had been written in silence, but its consequences arrived loudly. One cancelled access code, one withdrawn invitation, and one devastating message at a time. The first consequence reached Harry before the palace made any public announcement. A secure message informed him that an upcoming private visit to Windsor could no longer proceed under the previous arrangement. Minutes later, a second notice confirmed that his name had been removed from an internal ceremonial consideration list. The decision was no longer a threat inside a folder. It had entered his life. Harry read both notices twice. Palace staff were already applying the directive across several departments, replacing informal discretion with written restrictions. A ceremonial consideration list is an internal record used to decide who may be included in official royal occasions, and his removal meant future appearances would no longer be discussed as a matter of course. The next message hurt more. Future family visits had to pass through Charles's personal office, with no automatic residence, transport, security coordination, or institutional support. Harry could still ask to see his father, but he could no longer arrive through the doors that had once opened because of who he was. Windsor carried childhood, grief, and memories of Queen Elizabeth. Losing access felt like losing the last room where he still belonged. Meghan watched anger rise in him and urged restraint. She warned that any public attack would be used to prove the palace had been right to act so severely. Harry opened an old photograph of himself with William and Charles at Windsor. He studied it in silence, closed the image, and deleted a drafted message accusing the monarchy of erasing him. Charles received confirmation that the first restrictions had been enforced. The king gripped the paper and asked whether Harry had responded. When an aide said his son remained silent, the monarch's face tightened. He had secured the boundary he wanted, yet the silence felt worse than fury because it offered no path toward repair. Then, a former household official contacted Harry through a documented private message. The official admitted that the disputed communication channel had remained active because senior figures feared a complete family break. More damaging still, the message claimed people inside the palace knew the route survived, challenging the idea that Harry alone carried responsibility. Harry did not release the message. He requested one final private conversation with William, without Charles, advisors, or lawyers present. For the first time since order arrived, anger found a direction. He no longer wanted a statement. He wanted his brother's answer, spoken where neither title nor institution could hide it. The palace expected anger to erupt in public, but Harry's silence concealed a more dangerous decision. He would confront the brother who had supported the order and demand the truth man to man. For the first time in years, William and Harry entered a private conversation with no aides to interrupt, no statement to prepare, and no father waiting to rule between them. The titles remained outside the room. Inside were two brothers carrying the same childhood grief, the same family history, and completely different beliefs about what loyalty demanded. Neither expected forgiveness. Both expected pain. Harry asked the question before either man could retreat into caution. Had William pushed Charles to remove every privilege? The prince answered without delay. He had supported institutional separation, but he had opposed cutting off direct family contact. Institutional separation meant drawing a firm line between private relationships and the powers, access, and influence of the working monarchy. William believed that line mattered because blurred boundaries had already turned family trust into public conflict. Harry heard the explanation and felt the old wound open again. Every restriction, he said, proved the institution had never trusted him to exist beyond its control. William did not soften his reply. Trust had not broken because his brother left. It had broken because private moments kept returning as public ammunition, leaving the family unable to speak without fear. Then Harry placed the former official's documented message on the table. The words showed that palace figures knew the communication channel remained active. William read every line slowly. His expression changed, not with shock alone, but with recognition. The future king admitted that responsibility reached wider than the original directive suggested, and he promised the staff investigation would not end with Harry. Silence followed. Harry finally accepted that the channel should have closed when royal duties ended. He admitted that continuing to use those pathways had created a conflict he had refused to face, because part of him still wanted family access without institutional limits. The confession did not erase the damage, but it changed the room. William offered no reversal. He told Harry that brotherhood might survive without privilege, but only if neither man used family connection as royal power. Harry did not agree easily, yet he understood the difference for the first time. One bond belonged to blood, the other belonged to the crown. Their private understanding restored nothing on paper. It did not reopen Windsor, revive ceremonial access, or undo Charles's signature. Yet it changed the meaning of the decision before the palace and public delivered their final judgment. For once, neither brother had won, Yet neither had chosen another war again. The brothers left the room without embracing, but they also left without another threat, and that fragile restraint would shape how the world understood the most severe royal separation of the modern era. By sunrise, the private order had become a national spectacle. Broadcasters interrupted regular programming, commentators crowded palace gates, and newspaper presses carried the same devastating message in different words. The king had ended Harry's remaining royal privileges. What had begun with a signature in silence was now being judged by millions, each side seeing either necessary discipline or a father's final rejection. Charles approved a controlled palace statement before breakfast. It confirmed that Harry remained part of the family by birth, but held no automatic privileges inside the working royal structure. The working royal structure means the official system of duties, access, offices, and support surrounding active members of the monarchy. The wording avoided personal blame and described the order as a final clarification after unauthorized communication arrangements were discovered. Outside Buckingham Palace, a crowd gathered beneath a large broadcast screen as a presenter read the phrase, "complete institutional separation." The words meant that private family ties would no longer carry official royal power. Conversation faded. Even those who had arrived ready to argue fell quiet, because the language sounded colder than scandal. It sounded permanent. One major newspaper captured the division with a stark front page. Charles appeared on one side, and Harry on the other, divided by a black vertical line beneath the headline, "The Last Royal Door Closes." Supporters of the king called the decision overdue protection for the monarchy. Defenders of his younger son condemned it as punishment that had turned private pain into lasting exclusion. Charles watched the coverage for less than a minute before switching off the television. Camilla noticed his hands shaking and sat beside him without offering false comfort. The queen consort understood that public support could not soften a father's loss. The monarch had won control of the institution, yet he looked like a man who had paid for it with something no statement could restore. The palace then confirmed through its written briefing that the internal investigation would include current and former staff members. Harry was not the only person under scrutiny. He answered with a short recorded statement, accepting the end of his institutional privileges, while declaring that his relationship with Charles and William must now exist without royal machinery. The argument continued relentlessly, but its meaning had shifted forever. Headlines could choose winners. The family could not. What remained depended on whether father and sons could accept a bond stripped of access, influence, and protection. When the broadcasts ended and the crowds drifted away, the royal family was left with the truth no headline could soften. The privileges were gone, but the blood bond remained, stripped of every excuse and every protective layer. There was no final reversal, no last-minute intervention, and no hidden clause waiting to restore what had been removed. King Charles allowed the directive to stand in full. Harry lost every remaining privilege connected to royal access and institutional influence. Yet the order did not erase him from the family. Instead, it forced father, sons, and monarchy to confront a truth they had avoided for years. Charles read the withdrawal order once and decided it would remain permanent unless he replaced it. A withdrawal order is a formal command ending permissions allowed by the sovereign, and this one would not change while disputed systems, blurred boundaries, and broken trust remained unresolved. The king understood why that mattered. Reversing it too quickly would weaken the crown's authority and reduce every lesson to another temporary compromise. Harry accepted the new reality without a public attack. He could no longer depend on palace offices, protected briefings, ceremonial consideration, royal residences, or automatic access. The separation hurt, because those privileges had been the last thread connecting him to a role he had already rejected. Yet losing them also ended the uncertainty that had kept him trapped between freedom and belonging, never inside the monarchy and never fully beyond its reach. William faced a quieter truth. The prince could not rebuild his relationship with Harry through titles, invitations, or palace meetings. Any future bond had to exist privately, without institutional bargaining. The future king knew this offered no easy reunion, but it removed the weapon both brothers had used for years: royal access as proof of love. Charles then wrote a letter in his own hand. He offered no reversal, and made no promise of restored privilege. The monarch told his son that the palace doors were closed to entitlement, but not to a private conversation between father and son. Harry read the documented letter alone and understood the difference. The crown had rejected his access. His father had not erased his name. The new documents had exposed more than a hidden channel. They revealed a family that had confused love with authority, reconciliation with restoration, and private affection with institutional permission. Charles remained sovereign. William remained heir. Harry remained a son and brother, but no longer an extension of the working monarchy. The old arrangement ended with one signature, and no one pretended otherwise. The crown had protected its boundaries, Harry had been released from its final hold, and the family was left to discover whether love could exist after power no longer stood between them. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.